Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know it's early, so thank you. Also, I'm so happy to see so many people at a UX talk at a developer conference. Good for you. Or me, I don't know, maybe both. Just to be clear, this session is about UX, not card tricks. I do not know anything about card tricks. I think my husband does know. So if you're here for that, talk to him afterwards. I'm here for the UX part. I will start by asking you a question. Hands up if you have ever used a system, a page, an internal app, or program that has been a little bit too slow or way too complicated, something off. Yeah, 90% of you. Hands up again if at least one of those was an internal tool. Yeah, same number basically. I consult, and sometimes when I consult, I have to report my time in the client's system. And this is from one of those systems. I go to the page, and I log in, and I click Report Time. And it takes me here, where I have to log in. Because there's no way one web page can know that I wait a minute. Yeah, so I log in again, and I'm taken to this third page. And this looks completely different. Different colors, different layout, different everything. I don't even know if I'm at the same page anymore. But I click Report Time. Guess what? Log in. I have to log in again, because again, it's very complicated to log in. So I log in, and finally, I can report my time. Now this has issues itself, but this process takes about 16, 17 seconds. On very high-speed internet, I might add. 16, 17 seconds. Now imagine if you would have done this the right way, or a little bit more efficient, and actually took me to the report time when I asked you to. What would that take? 1 second? 2? Let's say 2, because it's easier to count. So I will save 15 seconds every time I need to report my time. I am a little bit impatient. That is true, and it doesn't sound that much. But if I do this every day, all of a sudden that's 5 minutes per month. That's a coffee break, so it's not too bad. But that's for one employee, in one system, one time. Now let's say we're a company mid-size, we have 200 employees. We have to log into this, I don't know, sales system or whatever tool you have 3 times per day. Not uncommon. Now we're talking 600 hours wasted per year. Now it's not only about my experience anymore. Now it's about companies losing money. And this is also what you need to say to your boss when they will not give you the funds or the resources to update the internal toolings. They are losing money. If they see this, they will think again, and you will be happier because you will have a better system to work with. My name is Jessica Engström. I'm a Windows Development MVP from Sweden. So if you saw the trivia slides, me and Jimmy, my husband down here, we're the Swedes. That's it. I need to move this way?
Yep.
There we go. I strayed. I do that. We run a company together which focuses on Windows development and fighting for a better UX for everybody, and also everything that's fun. So AI, bots, HoloLens, which Jimmy will talk about a little bit later today. We also have a podcast. So if you're into that sort of thing, we actually have a podcast on this topic as well as a bunch of others. But don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. Do you like it? Feel free to listen more. Does anybody recognize this book? Yeah, a couple of you. Awesome. I love this book. This is a best-selling UX book by cognitive scientist and usability engineer Donald Norman. And what I find amusing with this book is that it used to be, it's called the design of everyday things, but it used to be called the psychology of everyday things. Allegedly, that book with that name had a UX problem itself. Well, not the book, but the bookshops that took it in, they put it in the psychology department or mental health department, not the design and UX part. Which means if I come in as a designer or a UXer and I want a book, I won't find it. Now, I'm not sure if that is true or not, but it's a fun story, and also they did change the name. The name makes sense, though, because there are a lot of psychology going into UX. But it's not the only book out there. There's a lot of information about UX. There's thousands of books, there's thousands of studies and rules and what have you. We have researched this for hundreds of years. Granted, in the beginning it wasn't for software UI, but there's a surprisingly few differences between physical objects, the UX for physical objects, and the UX for the apps and web pages we do today. But how in the world are we going to be able to read all those books? How in the world are we going to be able to read all those studies? And how in the world are we going to make sense of it all? If we look at development, how many of you are developers in here? Oh, basically everyone, almost everyone. So you know there's a lot of conventions that we should follow, right? Like solid principles. They have taken all these conventions and boiled them down to the bare minimum or the most important ones. And the same is true for UX. There are hundreds of UX principles, laws, and rules, but as a developer, there's usually not time or resources to study and learn all these. And should developers do that? I don't know. This is Steve Herbst and Michael Medlock. They used to work at Microsoft UX research team. They're still in UX though, but they quit Microsoft since. I've had the fortune to sit down with this and actually train by Michael Medlock as well. And they too thought that there was a little bit too much information out there about UX, and sometimes a little bit fluffy information, and that's my words, not his. Not clear sometimes to why something was bad or how you would go about to fix it. So they realized that all these fantastic materials that we have, thousands of books and studies, it's too much for the departments to sometimes read up on. So they actually saw this at Microsoft. They had one team with the same UX rules as this team, but the results were so different because they interpreted it differently. So they started to analyze things, the heuristic tools, the books, the studies, and they were thinking, what are they really trying to say here? What are they trying to solve? And they did so for years and years. And I mean, all the information is out there. We just need to understand what they're trying to say, because the problem is some of these books and studies are using different types of vocabulary, which may say the same thing, but if you interpret it differently, you don't know. So they came up with a system called Tenets and Traps, which is the essence of all these studies that they made. And this is a system that Microsoft has used internally before to catch a few of the UX traps, not all, of course, but some of them before they release software. But also companies like Oculus, Google, Amazon, Facebook are using this system as well. So I will base today's talk on these decks of cards, a systematic approach to UX. My goal with this talk is to show you that you can rock your user experience without reading all those books, without reading all those studies, and without becoming or being a UX specialist. Well, you might become one, though. So what is Tenets and Traps? Oh, we do have so many Doctor Who fans in here. I love you. I love you. For those who don't get the reference, after Star Trek, spend the weekend, watch Doctor Who. It will all make sense later. Unfortunately, it's not that Tenet, it's Tenet. So Tenets describes general attribute about good design, what we want, basically. And Traps describes common design problems that will degrade that tenet. Reduce the traps and your UI will improve, your experience will improve. Tenets and traps are also related to each other. So each trap has a tenet that it will degrade. For example, if someone says that your app is slow or doesn't respond, it will degrade the tenet responsive, for instance. And this system has several strengths. First, it's the essence of a whole lot of research that's been done, and it also separates the positive attributes from the negative one in a very clear way. So we know not only what the problem is, but also why, and most of the times how to fix it. And I love that. And it also, it's plain English. So it's very easy to understand. It's very easy to communicate with your users, with a UXer, with your fellow developer, with yourself if you want to, because it's plain English. There are a total of 9 tenets, and all the tenets have at least one or more traps. I'm not going to talk about all the traps, but let's take the tenet understandable as an example. It has 9 traps to it. It's also the one that has the most traps, so don't worry. It's not complicated at all. It has 9 things that will degrade understandable. 9 things that will make your user experience less understandable. Simply put, 9 things you should avoid. Before we dive too deep into this, let's look at how you can work with this system. First of all, we need to identify the task we want to test. Choose the most important one. So if we are Instagram, for example, I think that the most important thing for Instagram is to be able to share a picture onto Instagram. So we need to list all the ways I can do that. I can open the Instagram app. I can browse for a picture from there. I can open Instagram and press the camera button. I can go to the gallery and share to Instagram, and so on. So we walk through all the different ways we can share a picture. We identify and log all the traps we find or the comments that people give while they're trying out this function. Preferably, you would cross-validate with another person who's also doing tests like this. Sometimes I know there's not enough resources and time to do that, so it's better to have done it than to be able to cross-reference. But it's very good, and it's also very easy to discuss your findings because, again, plain English. So that would be the report and discuss part of the system. Preferably, don't test your own UI. You already know this, but you made it up. You will understand how it works. So have your mom test it. It's awesome, or your friend, or whatever you have going for you. Ask someone on the street if you need to. Try to listen for language like, this is slow, or where's the button, where do I click? Things like that will make it so much more easier to pinpoint what trap we are working with. Sometimes, though, that's not as easy as it sounds, and we need to identify the tenet that is being degraded instead, so we can work from there. So we know that something is not understandable, but we don't know exactly which one of the 9, We can start from there, so we can still make it work. Can you always use this system? That would be too easy. But almost, I would say, there are a few exceptions. Like if you have a shopping app, there's a lot of psychology going into shopping as well. There's, if we're going to buy a pair of shoes, for instance. I don't know, I hate buying shoes. I don't know why I said that. Okay, let's go with shoes. I started it, so. We're buying shoes. I can find the shoes in the shoes department, but I can also find it in people who bought this also bought that pair of shoes, or we can find it in sales or news or whatever. And that is okay as long as that is for a shopping app or a store app, because that's what we want. But having duplicates like that in a regular UI might not be a good idea. Also games. Games doesn't have to follow design guidelines blindly. And quite frankly, it's kind of nice that it's a little bit difficult, because pressing a button to get to the last level, I would be so good at games, but it also would be very boring. So you need to use your common sense here. I will say, though, that the rest of the deck you can use for games and shops. It's just some of them you need to use your common sense. If you want to know more about Tenets and Traps or get the cards, these are the URLs, one for the US, one for the rest of the world. I will put this up at the last slide as well, so if you miss it, there will be more links. So let's jump in. This is the first tenet, understandable. When a UI is understandable, the user is aware of the action they can take because the UI contains concepts that are easily learned. Like if I press download, I get the file. Understandable is, again, the one with the most traps, and I will show you 5 of them, so not all of them. Show of hands, how many have ever run into a dumb user? Yeah, 90% of you. I used to say that as well. But don't be so quick to judge your user. They haven't yet learned your system or the way you think. So sometimes they're not dumb. I'm sorry. My mom, she is, I don't want to call her dumb because this is recording. She's not dumb. She's awesome. But she is not technical. I can say that. She is not technical at all. Let me set this stage, how not technical she is. Back when XP was a thing, actually, even she had XP for a while. Remember XP, the blue little windows, awesome, amazing things. So she lives close to my brother. I live quite far from her, so my brother takes all the tech support. And back there, you needed to defrag your computer, you needed to reinstall it all the time. Today you don't need to do that, but back then you had to. So my brother did that. And one day he was there fixing her computer, and she called me when he left. And she's like, "He uninstalled all my games." I'm like, "No, I don't think so." "Nope, they're not here." But he wouldn't uninstall your games because the only thing you use your computer for is to play games. He is not a bad person. "He must reformat my computer," because she knew that word. Because reformatting means no games in her world. I'm like, but if he were to do that, he would have reinstalled your games. "Nope, but did he say that he will come back tomorrow?" "He was done. He ruined it. Can you install them for me?" I'm like, "But, oh, okay." So I remote into her computer and I ask her, "How do you usually start your games?" Because I have no clue how she does it. I mean, you can go to the desktop, you can go to the menus. I press the flag and D. And with that, she means Windows and D, so desktop. So I go to the desktop and I see the games. And I say, "They're right there." "No, they're not. but I see them. They're right there. And I figured that my brother, he's a neat freak like me, so I figured he just aligned everything very nicely, so if it was scattered before, she didn't find them. Nope, they're not there. Okay, can you see my mouse cursor? And I'm hovering over one of the games like a crazy person, and she's like, oh, but they're green. Because back then, you could have 3 different colors. You could have the classical blue, you could have a dark chrome, and an olive green. And my brother decided that olive green is better, which meant my mom couldn't find her games because they were green. That's how not technical she is. So now you know. My brother, on the other hand, he was not born, he was compiled. He is as technical as they come. So fast forward to, it was a Christmas, and my mom got, I think it was a Surface Pro 1, one of those laptop touch computers with Windows 8. And she was up visiting us, but she had to go home just a few days after, so I didn't have time to actually show her how Windows 8 worked. And I mean XP, Windows 8, that's quite the difference. So she went home, and I was, a couple of days later, I was like, okay, she's going to call now. Here comes the support calls. No calls. Okay. A week went by, and I like say, now she will call. No calls. Okay, so she called my brother. No calls to my brother. Turns out Windows 8 was for her the easiest thing in the world because it had large, clear symbols. Press the little envelope, and you will get your email. Press the camera, and you know what I'm saying. So no support. She even started her own Facebook page. She's an admin now. However, she needed a new router, and my brother, he got that. And since Windows 8, she was a little bit more curious to tech. So she was following him around like a dog. Like, what are you doing there? Oh, you need to connect the cable. Is that the internet? And she was following him around, watching every step of the installation of this router. And they're almost finished, and my brother says, you can go drink coffee now. And she's like, huh? Yeah, go drink coffee. I will fix this. And she's like, but I want to see what you're doing. Yeah, no, Microsoft has ruined Windows. And she's like, what? Yeah, totally, completely ruined Windows. They have taken away all the settings. It's super difficult to find. You don't need to be here for this. This will take some time. I will fix this. You only need to do this once. And she's like, but what are you really trying to do? Well, I need to put in the password for your Wi-Fi Wi-Fi in your network settings. And she's like, oh, okay. You mean like this? And she goes and swipes from the right, press the settings button, and there it is. The super difficult to find settings that Microsoft ruined. So how is it that my very non-technical mom could find this, but my super technical brother couldn't? Well, there's at least 2 factors that affects our attention. There's the user's goals and expectations, and there's the visual display of information and choices that we have. So what happened here is there was no indicator for my brother to show that there was an invisible element to the side. My brother didn't expect it to be there, so he didn't look. And he didn't use the charms bar, as that was called back then. So he wasn't used to it. And this was something completely new in Windows 8. And my mom is probably the only one that looked through the tutorial you get when you install Windows. My brother obviously did not. So if we were to analyze this with the help of Tenets and Traps, we would listen for, I can't see it. Actually, what he said was a lot of cussing and stuff like that, but I won't go into that. Let's call it, I don't see it. if you don't see it, you really don't understand it, do you? So this is an invisible element that degrades understandable, the tenet understandable. Don't get me wrong, invisible can be awesome. Keyboard shortcuts. Can you even develop without them? I don't know. I love keyboard shortcuts. But there's also a way for it to be done in the menu. And that's the important thing. If you don't miss out, if you don't know the keyboard shortcuts, that's fine. But if you do, there needs to be a way to find it if you don't know the secret handshake, so to speak. And speaking of invisible elements, type the text you see. Do you see any text? No. This is from a learning management system that a school that I teach at sometimes uses. And I was going to compose a new message. Where do I click? On the leaf, of course. That's how everybody writes. I think that they were going for something like a quill, but that's definitely not a quill. That's a leaf. So that's an effectively, oh, they changed it to a pen so we can know it. So that's an effectively invisible element because I saw it, but I ignored it because leaf. Maybe they were trying for something like email is you're saving paper. I don't know. I'm trying to defend them here. I should stop. A UI element that suddenly appears like these notifications is a definite distraction that will draw the attention from the user, will distract them from their goals. Remember back when, I think it was Windows Vista, it might have been Windows 7. No, I think it was Vista. Down in the sys tray, you got a little pop-up notifications all the time, and it sounded like you were popping a tiny little balloon. Yeah, prime example of distractions. Whatever you were doing, all of a sudden you were down here reading some information you didn't even need to know. Don't do that. All types of animation, pop-ups, notifications, they are distractions, so be careful about that. Sometimes systems, they force the user to remember things that might be hard to understand, or hard to remember, I should say, so easy to forget. And I thought that what I'm about to show you was a thing of the past, back when Yahoo was a thing, but it's getting a comeback. When you sign up for something, you need to choose a security question in case you forget your password. In my case, when I forget my password. True story. So what happens here is I need to make up my mind to what question to choose. So in my head, there's a debate going on. Should I do the favorite teacher, which I really don't have one, or should I do my favorite pet? And how do you choose? They're all my fur babies. Do I take the latest one, the first one, the biggest one, the smallest one? I don't know, I can choose. So I have these debate going on, so I don't even remember what question I chose. And then I need to remember the answer as well. Would be easier just to remember my password, but that's a whole other issue. I do use a password app, so I'm just bad with passwords. Some cases, these are very US-centric, and I'm not from the US, so choosing what state my mom was born in, not applicable. So that narrows the questions down as well. Sometimes you need to pick 3 questions. And then when you go back and you are forgetting your password, when I forget my password, I need to remember what question I chose, because they won't just ask me the question. They said, pick the question you chose. So yeah, I have so many email accounts. This is a memory challenge. Anybody have a Alexa or Google Home or Cortana? Yeah, awesome. We control everything at home with these devices. I have no clue what light switch goes to whatever light. But there is something called forced syntax. And that is, what if I couldn't tell Alexa, turn on the kitchen table or kitchen lights? What if I had to say, Alexa, kitchen light dot state equals quote on end quote. Well, that's kind of forced, isn't it? So forced syntax is when the user cannot, in a way cannot type or talk in a way for them that feels natural. Does that make sense? Yeah. Awesome. A UI is comfortable when the user can physically perform actions quickly and error-free. That's the gist of this tenet. We have a trap here called physical challenge, and let's look at that. Sometimes the user knows exactly what to do, but has a hard time doing so. Like this poor guy. He knows exactly what he needs to do, but having a hard time physically doing that. Or if you were to use this on a touch device, you would press like 1,100 things at the same time. Granted, this is not designed, I hope, for touch, and it's probably has all the traps in the deck, but no, that will be a physical challenge trying to maneuver that UI, I'd say. It could also be this. When the contrast is so bad, you can't read it. Or when you're using a very intricate typeface or a too small font, for that matter. That is also a physical challenge. A UI is responsive when it reacts instantly or at least fast on the user's input. And this might be the most important tenet of them all, at least I think so, because I'm a rage quitter. Yeah, I see nodding here, thank you, I'm not the only rage quitter here. Because even small delays can have dramatic effects on the user's behavior. It doesn't matter if you have the most beautiful app or web page out there, and it's super easy to use. Because if it's slow or non-responsive, I will quit on you. And since this is an important one, I say we go through all the traps. When the system doesn't respond, or seemingly doesn't respond, could be very slow, I go like this. I click like a crazy person. I'm ashamed to say so. I hope I'm not the only one. Awesome. This would be slow or non-responsive. To prevent this, there are a couple of things we can keep in mind, like provide a confirmation within 100 milliseconds. Could be that the button looks pressed in, that's it. As long as you initiate it before 100 milliseconds, you're fine. Provide a response within 500 milliseconds if it's something that the user perceives as easy to perform, like minimizing a window or zooming and things like that. You don't need to be finished with it in 500 milliseconds, but you need to have started it so they know that something is going on. Make sure to give continuous feedback for processes that takes longer than a second, like a simple animation, the wheelie thing, for instance. That's awesome. If there are waits more than 2 seconds, we also need to provide a progress bar or a similar thing that gives you information that things are going to happen here. So you have some sort of information, not just the wheelie thing, because if you have the wheel, you will feel that it's stuck. You never know. So you will try to reinstall the app, or I rage quit, quite frankly. That's what I do. And if you have such indicator with information on, make sure that you are clear that things are being done, that progress is being made every 2 to 5 seconds, so the user knows that the text isn't frozen. And someone that does this excellently is the people behind Dragon Mania Legends. Anybody played Dragon Mania Legends? No, it's a super cute game. Oh, you do? Oh, awesome. Yeah, they're cute dragons. How can you not love dragons? If you look down in the white square, you will see things like mapping Dragonlandia, dusting Academy Hall, sewing mini Vikings. Of course, that's not what you're doing. They're just getting all the assets and your data, but I don't need to know that. And this is quite fun because they changed it up, which means I'm entertained while I wait because oh, look, they said that, haha, cute. I'm easily entertained. I rage quit, but I'm also easily entertained. So that's what you need to do. Speaking about entertainment, you know when you're browsing YouTube and you watch one too many cat videos and all of a sudden you get an ad that you cannot skip in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. You try to avoid it, you go back, you still need to see it. You refresh the page, they still force you to see it. You try to click one of the other cat videos, again, they're forcing you to see it. That is captive wait. They're forcing you to sit there and watch the ad, which is also the last trap here. A UI is efficient when the user perceives that they are doing things in a minimum amount of steps. And the key word here is perceive. It doesn't have to be fewer steps, as long as it feels like fewer steps. Most of the times, to make it feel fewer steps, you need to have fewer steps, but not always. Let's look at 3 of the traps in efficient. This is what it looks like when you're buying a movie ticket in Sweden. I know you can totally read everything on there. Yeah. At least you can see it was for Avengers Infinity Wars, right? So in this case, I'm ordering 4 tickets to the movie, and I have prepaid ticket numbers that I need to fill in so I don't have to pay again. I fill in one of the numbers and I'm prompted to prove that I'm not a robot. Now, I've seen robots do this, but let's pretend they don't. So I click, I'm not a robot. And I type in the second number, and I'm prompted again. Are you a robot? Like, no, I wasn't a robot 10 seconds ago. That's not how, I do have an implant, but I mean, it doesn't, 10 seconds. And I had to do that for 4 times. I'm not a robot, I'm pretty sure. Funny thing is that, well, I should tell you that this is an unnecessary step. What I should have been doing was put in all the numbers and then I'm not a robot, or the other way around. So I'm only not a robot once. I'm only not a robot. Well, we established that I'm not a robot. 4 times is fine. But when we were going to see the latest Star Wars movie, we were 18 friends. 18 times I was not a robot. I don't know why I'm the only one buying the tickets, but I'm pretty sure I'm not a robot. This is from Xbox One. Well, it's from Xbox.com, I should say, back when Xbox One was fairly new to the market. And I browse to Xbox.com, and you can see my profile up there. And I'm prompted with an ad, and it says, get an Xbox One. Okay. And to the side of that, you can see, play Halo. That's a cool game. That's cool. But look down here to the right. My recent activity was playing Halo on Xbox One. They knew. Why are they wasting all that ad real estate for stuff I already bought? They should be still selling me other stuff, right? So this is system amnesia. All of a sudden, the system didn't remember, although it did know the information. I recently became the victim of autocorrect. We've all been there, right? I do a lot of events, mostly developer events like hackathons and code evenings and stuff like that. But we have a couple of friends that are in the DevOps space, and I found myself helping out a lot in the DevOps space. And we also have a friendly fight going on. So we have Team Marvel and Team DC. I'm the right team, I mean Marvel. And he is the DevOps guy, he is Team DC. And he had a field day with this. And by the way, if you like those cats, I do have stickers of those. So I will be here for the whole conference. So this is actually also a real conversation. We're all nerds here. You feel me? So I typed, Deadpool is the best superhero. And I sent that to my DC friend, and he got this. Yeah, he had a field day. It went viral, at least in our little circle, and I only had one option, and that was to go back to dev events only. That's the only choice I had. So this is a bad prediction, very, very bad prediction. No, DevOps is fine, we're just friendly fighting. Forgiving might be the easiest tenet of them all. A UI is forgiven when the user can undo something they just did. We all make mistakes, right? Like Word. We do have either Control-Z or undo up in the menu here, and we can basically undo a whole book. That's how good it is. But if a user were unable to undo a step, I should say, that would have been an irreversible action. So just make sure that the user can save and we're all fine. Or undo, I should say. Discrete also has only one trap, I should say. And this is when the user can go about their business in a social context without social disruption or embarrassment for either them or the people around you. We all like discretion, right? You wouldn't want the ATM machine to read up your PIN code out loud. Not very discreet. That actually has happened in Sweden many, many years ago. When you walked in and you pressed the hearing aid button, it would read that back to you. They were very fast to fix it, but not discreet. Or games at Facebook. Or when Spotify, do you use Spotify? Yeah, a couple of you. Spotify got a Facebook connection back in the day, and it posted every single song that you were listening to, every single song that your friends were listening to. You couldn't even see what they had for lunch anymore because there was only songs everywhere. So this is unwanted disclosure. Let's look at protective. Also only have one trap here. I told you I was organizing a lot of events, and we were organizing a hackathon. I think it was for 80 or 100 people. And we sometimes get sponsor money for organizing events, and we try to stretch the money so we can do as many events as possible, which means we do a lot of the work ourselves. So we prepared the venue the night before, stayed up late, and for some reason we put the hackathon 9 in the morning on a Saturday. I don't know what we were thinking, but Saturday comes, early morning, the guy who was driving was late. We were going to the shop, the supermarket, and getting a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff. You know how many Red Bulls you need for a 36-hour hackathon with 100 developers? Hundreds, I say. So we have self-scanning in Sweden, quite similar to your self-checkout, but you actually get the scanner wirelessly. So you walk around the store and you scan an item, you put it in your bag, and then when you're done, you just walk out the store. Well, you pay first, hopefully. You need to pay first, but you do it while you're scanning, which makes things go so much faster because you're already packed and done. And we fill the cart. I mean, I think it was 300 energy drinks, there was soda and snacks and food and what have you. And I had 1 or 2 items left. And I take my scanner and I'm going to blip, and it didn't sound anything. Usually there's a blip. And I look at it and it's black. And we're already late. And we have a ways to go. So I feel the panic crawling, and for some reason I lose the ability to speak. So I go to the clerk with my black scanner and I'm like, ah. And she's like, oh, yeah. She speaks crazy. So she put it back and she gives me another one. I'm like, oh, shoot. I need to rescan everything and we need to repack everything. And I'm complaining in my head, and then I look down and it says, welcome, Jessica. And all my scanned items were there. The only thing I needed to do was scan those last 2 items, pay, and we were on our way. So we made it on time. That is being protective. That is what we will strive for, right? This is what we want. Having to press save to commit your changes is most likely redundant. Because this is something we had to do back in the day where computer memory was very expensive and hard to come by, and storage didn't come as cheap as it does today. So the trap here is data loss, which is the opposite and as to the supermarket I was into, trying to shop for a hackathon. And I thought that meme was fun. Yeah. Until a couple of weeks ago, where that happened, a friend of mine, my age. All of a sudden, I'm old. So I don't know if this is fun anymore. I do have a sewing machine that can read floppy disk, though. So there's that. So always save your users' data if you're able to, is what I'm trying to say here. As humans, we cannot help but to learn habits. It's hardwired into us. And this is something that is sometimes overlooked when it comes to user interface, but you really should take advantage of. A UI is habituating when over time the user does things automatically. They don't have to look it up, they don't have to think, it just works. I was interviewed on a podcast, and the podcaster, or the host, I should say, he asked me, so can you give me an example of a really great app with a really great UX? I was like, yeah, it's the ones that just work. That was not the answer he wanted. But that's true. If it just works, it's fantastic. Let's look at 3 of the traps here. Oh, one is not like the other. Let's hide that. When we have different appearance for the same action across the system, the UI, or even the operating system, we have an inconsistent appearance, like create new, for instance. We have a lot of different options. Apparently, we could put a leaf here as well. That's a create new. Which means it will take us longer to understand exactly what it is. There's also a lot of ways to initialize an IM, an instant message or a private message on Facebook, for instance, which is a problem when my mom calls and I have to help her, but I don't know where she is because there's 10 different ways to do that. But that's not the only reason. Because if we are presented with multiple choices, it will take a longer time for us to decide what method to use. Even if it's very fast, we will still have to do that, make that decision. And there's nothing habituating with having 10 different ways of doing the same thing, is there? So this trap is called gratuitous redundancy. This is another example of that. I'm going to the room 3600. Is it right? Is it left? Is it a little bit more to the right? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody ever gets to that room. We all feel a little better when we have a sense of home, right? A place where we can regroup or whatever we do at home. And this is true for a UI as well. A clear starting point where we can start over or start fresh is awesome. And if we don't have that, the user can perceive the app as slower. They can never even get slower and a little bit more confusing if there's not one clear way to do that. When there's no sense of home, we have an ambiguous home, which is exactly what it sounds like. But it can also be the other way around, like when Netflix came out for Xbox One. What category do we put Netflix in? Children, entertainment, app, movie, series? All of them. That's what they did. When it came out, it was in 10 different categories, which means it had a lot of homes. Well, there wasn't any issues to finding it, though. But still, there was not one clear place to find it. So this definitely did not have a sense of home. Beautiful. This is the last tenet and the last trap. Although it sounds obvious that a beautiful UI will appeal to the user, a lot of the UIs are being neglected in this department because, well, it's so close to finished, let's just publish it and fix it later. Later never comes. Later never comes. And also, what is beautiful is very individual. There has been trials to figure out what's beautiful, but there's nobody who has succeeded yet. When an app is clearly made for one platform, but released on multiple platforms without tweaking, that would be not beautiful. Like a back button in the software UI when you're releasing for an Android, or back in the day when you had Windows Phone, that has a hardware button or a specific button for that already in the UI, you're taking up unnecessary space. And also, I will feel that something is off. Sometimes the users don't know that why something is off, but they will feel that it's off. Show of hands, who would put in their ATM cards here? No? Nobody? I wonder why. Well, the boxes aren't aligned. The machine doesn't look professional, does it? The handwritten notes doesn't give it a little more credibility, does it? Therefore, this will go under unattractive appearance. Or scary UIs. I don't know. Another thing that goes under unattractive appearance is when you don't utilize the different design languages for the platforms that's out there. Like Google has material design, Apple has human interface design, Microsoft has Microsoft Design Language or going towards Fluent. Because if you read up on those guidelines, it will be so much better. And I'm not saying you need to do all the things. I'm saying you need to glance it through for the platform that you're going to publish on to see that you're not completely off. Because they will feel it, the users will feel it. If you give this a couple of minutes, it will be so much better. Today, we live in a world where internet is getting faster and faster, where new apps and services are released at a so fast pace, and the sheer amount of apps is mounting up like crazy. We're also at a stage where we're thinking more and more about diversity and inclusion, which is great. But this also means that UX will be so much more important than ever. If your page is a little bit slow or not as clear to use as your competitor, or if we don't have a good experience for the users, we will lose our credibility, we will lose our users, and we might even lose money. So try not to get lost in your next release or stuck in your massive backlog. Everything we are developing, we are doing for the user. So be like Tron. He fights for the user. Thank you.